Hey everyone, and welcome back to Couchconfidentials, the podcast where we challenge the Martech status quo and have honest conversations with the people building the tools we all rely on. I'm your host, Matthew Niederberger, and today I'm joined by Oussama Ghanmi. He's the CEO and co-founder of DinMo. It's a composable CDP vendor based in Europe. Now, I first came across DinMo during a demo recording, which you may or may not have seen on this channel, and I was struck about how clean and focused their take on the CD problem is. But what really got me thinking, and the reason for today's episode, is the bigger picture around data privacy, security, and where your data actually lives. I mean, with growing political tensions between the US and Europe and cities like Amsterdam now actively moving away from US hosted software, it raises an interesting question. Is it still safe or smart for European companies to keep relying on US based cloud tools? Usama's in a unique position to talk about this, not just as a product builder, but as someone who is witnessing these shifts in real time as a European SaaS founder. So let's get into it. Hey, Oussama, thanks for joining. Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself real quickly? I know I did a small spiel on you, but it's better coming from you. Trust me.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew, for the invitation. So I'm Oussama. I'm the founder and CEO of DinMo, a Paris-based SaaS company. We're building a new generation of customer data platforms that is more compliant with local customer data regulation, like GDPR, and also more flexible and more accessible for many companies. So yeah, we'll get the chance to speak a little bit about the company and what we're doing in the podcast. But really happy to join you in this podcast, and hopefully we will have a good chat.
That's super great. Just for the people listening, if you don't recognize the accent, it is French, but there's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different people or places around the world where that could have come from. But just for the record, you are located in Paris, France. That's correct?
Yeah, I'm located in Paris. Our headquarters is in Paris, but we have an office in the UK. And I think you hosted the podcast where you invited David and Ed from our UK team. So
yeah, that was great. And I've actually literally just booked my holiday to Paris. We're driving through there this summer and always kind of look forward to that. I'm glad that the Olympic Games are over and hopefully it's going to be a little less chaotic, I need to say.
Yeah, you should come by the office. We are like really center Paris, not far from the Grand Boulevard. So
okay, well then that gives me a reason to write off part of the holiday. Anyway. Perfect. To set the stage for today's conversation, there's been a growing amount of noise and concern around the intersection of data privacy and geopolitics. And I know I'm not the best person to talk about politics. I've actually stopped reading or skipping over a lot of the news since somewhere last year. But anyway, it feels like we've entered this new phase where tool selection isn't just about features or price anymore, but also about trust, control, and most importantly, jurisdiction. I mean, we've got cities who I saw this news article last week that the Amsterdam, or at least the City Council of Amsterdam, saying that they'll ditch US cloud tools. I mean, we've got European companies asking tougher questions about data residency. And meanwhile, most of us are still relying on stacks that are deeply tied to US infrastructure, especially around hosting and advertising. So I wanted to have this conversation with you, not just to talk about DinMo as a product, but to dig into this bigger moment we're in at the moment. I mean, what does it mean to build, especially for you, or to buy as customers, software in a world where your data lives, your data lives have become a political issue? So, let's start with I like to say the elephant in the room. And it's the most obvious question. I mean, do you feel like there's a growing hesitation from European companies when it comes to using US-based tools or cloud platforms? Like, are people starting to worry about where their data actually is going to live?
To be honest, it's the case, and it doesn't started yesterday. It started a few years ago, and started with GDPR, etc. And especially with the explosion of the online advertising, and the dominance of US companies like Meta, Google, etc. There have been like a huge concern about, okay, so we have European consumers that use those products that are really global.
Yeah.
Like when you have Meta, you have Instagram, and you have Facebook, or you have Google with the first search engine in Europe. There's clearly like a lot of customer data that have been used for personalization, etc. But at the end, you never know where it will land, especially when you have like those tough times with geopolitical issues between countries, etc. And from this concern, we created I think Europe was the first, the European Union were first to regulate the use of first-party data
Yeah.
But lately, it has been accelerated with the concerns about this global stability. It's more of a, let's say, we are in times where we can't like predict what would happen like the next year. And we see that the change of the government in the US would have a global impact on relations with tariffs, etc. So yeah, this has accelerated also the concern of, we should be independent on some strategic industries from the global economy. Not only the US, it's the same issue also with the China and Chinese companies, etc. So to answer the question, we have built our go-to market motion based on this hypothesis that European companies would prefer if they have the same functionalities a European player, for many reasons. But one of the reasons that they always talk about as our customers is the fact that we can comply with local regulation, and that they are sure if they have any issues, is governed by the local laws in Europe and not the laws in the US, cross borders, etc. So it had been. For example, if you go to France or Germany, it's really such, and you would have like all the time, even if there's like an RFP and there are like American players that do the same thing, a bonus for local players for obvious reasons like local support, the fact that psychologically, if you have like an important tool in your stack, you can call someone that is on the same time zone, etc. And also because they know that the data protection officer would require a lot of changes on your contracts, etc. So they would require some outside of the technology, some companies that really understands the specificities of the local regulations and are keen to change their contracts to comply with the local regulations. So yeah, I've seen it every day, to be honest. But I believe it should not only be the regulation that would drive the adoption of the European technology. It should also be on the product itself. But yeah, absolutely.
Corporate responsibility, but that offers quite a few questions here. So I love the comment around the support, because I was literally in a discussion, I think just over a week ago, with a customer who's choosing this SaaS platform, and he literally, my contact literally sent me a message, "Hey, how can I beat it? How can I not choose this when their customer support lists 15 minutes down the road?" It doesn't get even more local than that. But you mentioned that a lot of companies are kind of, they get sucked into the wake of European regulations. And I agree with you to the extent that companies should also be considerate of their own responsibility and dealing with this data. And you mentioned that you deal with these kind of questions every day, but what should the role of a CDP vendor or any SaaS vendor be towards the customer? Or is this, again, something that the customer should be fully responsible of themselves? I mean, I'm not a legal expert, not in the slightest, but I know I have respect for the situation, but it's so confusing. There are so many different laws that need to be considered. I mean, is it a question of education, or like you said, the responsibility? How do you guys deal with that with customers who might not be aware of all these laws and the potential benefits of moving locally?
Yeah,
that was a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I understand the question. So the first part, I think it's related to the contract. Like when you go and sign the contract, it's outside of the features that you have in the product, because those local regulations would have an impact on the features that would develop, comply, and make it simple for companies that we work with to comply with local regulations. Let's say, for example, anonymization features for customer data, the ability to suppress a profile from all the systems that the profile exists in if the European consumer asks for removal of all his records from all those systems. So this is the responsibilities of in terms of features, and it has like a real impact. They're not like core features of the customer data platform.
Yeah.
They're not like features that would create value in terms of revenues, margin for the company, but they are necessary to comply simply with the local regulation. And we are building this from our side. Yeah, we have like a major thing, like for example, redacting PII, because there are like many users that would use the product from outside the company. Yeah, those GDPR features, etc. And obviously, they make a big difference when you have an RFP, because for companies that are global, that are more used on to the US regulation, they're really soft on those features because they are not core business, and they would be developed only for local regulation in Europe, especially, but also, and I think it's really important, like when you get to the contract, people need to make sure that you understand the local regulation and you can answer any question. And you have a DPA, processing agreement, etc. And you have people internally that would that would answer the questions of the DPO of the company that you deal with. And for me, this is really important. Like you need to show that you are not only compliant but also aware of all the evolution, and you can comply if it's asked. And because we are headquartered in Europe, it's reassuring for the customers, because we need to be compliant. Otherwise, we are we're not compliant with the law, because we are regulated in Europe and we're headquartered in Europe. So obviously, and we're talking about customer data. It's really, really critical. It's never an easy decision to say I would give access to my customer data, which is like my most valuable asset, to a new company. And obviously, you mentioned all the geopolitical issues, etc. And we had like some precedents where, in the US for terrorism issues, etc. The CIA, they went to those big companies and they asked for records of certain customers. So if you get to to those kind of issues, you don't know what's going to be in the future, like in 1 year or 2 years. It's not only a question of data transfers, etc. It's even like the company, if the data is stored in Europe physically, so they comply with it. Do we have the guarantee that in 1 year, 2 years, you won't be in the situation where you gave access to your customer data to a player from another country, that doesn't comply with the same laws, and maybe they.
But even large companies like Apple, they buckled. I think in the UK, they were forced to give kind of backdoor access into their platform, which I was very surprised by, because one of the biggest reasons I enjoy Apple's technology is the perceived security that they're giving me as an individual and securing my privacy. But you as a company owner, I need to ask you this, because when I scroll through my LinkedIn feed, I sometimes see people complaining. EU this, Ursula that. Up to March of last year, I had 2 nationalities. I had nationality in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch, but I also had an American citizenship, and I actually renounced my U.S. citizenship. I did service there. I still have some patriotic genes in me, but because of tax issues between both countries, if I get a discount here from the Dutch tax service, I still need to, and the U.S. doesn't recognize it, I still need to pay the difference there. So, and it gets passed along to the rest of my family, my kids, and I didn't want that. So I said, all right, I'll become Dutch. So, but I've noticed that ever since kind of this escalation between this transatlantic escalation, I'm starting to understand what it means to be pro-European. And I've seen a couple of discussions around, when you look at the US, it's I don't know, I think they're up to 360 million, or I don't know how many residents. Yeah. But Europe, I mean, yeah, sure. Netherlands is small, 18 million. But when you count everybody together, you've got a huge market. And I think for European businesses, there's a lot of potential here. But my question to you as a business owner, do you feel like because of the complaints that I've seen on LinkedIn, do you feel like your hands are tied because of so many regulations within Europe? Or on the other hand, do you understand why those regulations are in place? I mean, be fully free and frank here. And
honestly, it's very personal. I think it's very subjective, because we're hearing obviously from other founders so many different opinions.
Yeah.
I'm pro-regulation, not like over-regulation. We don't regulate things that don't exist yet. And we have seen this in Europe lately with artificial intelligence, etc. We don't know what we're dealing with, and we're already regulating. So I'm against, like the fear reaction. So we're feeling this impact of the artificial intelligence. So we're over-regulating. I think it would block innovation. But at the other hand, honestly, what we have done with GDPR, it changed all the industry. It was really, really the first time with the cookies, banners, etc. Everyone was saying like, yeah, it will destroy industries, etc. Look, right now everyone is aware of this. It's even the West, they imported this, and now it's becoming a standard. And it's giving users I think sometimes we should stop saying Europe is over-regulating, bureaucracy, etc. No, it's the way. For me personally, it's the way. it defines the type of society that you want to live in. Do you want to live in a society that's completely liberal, where you can be fired for no reason, everything changes and you need to adapt to all the changes that happens and you have no control over this? Or you want to have live in a country or a continent where we think about the impact, the social impact of any new technology, and we need to adapt and we regulate because we believe we have values, and regulating, for example, the use of customer data for me is extremely important because it came super fast, like this globalization with those tech platforms like Meta, like Google, and we didn't have time to analyze the impact, etc. And it becomes like a public space. Why are we regulating like public spaces and not regulating like those spaces where everyone is talking and etc. So if we have those major companies and they're operating in Europe, I believe if they want to like have business in Europe, they need to comply with the regulation that is important for European governments and European people. And it's obvious. And really, I don't think it blocks the innovation, to be honest. Contrary, it creates new businesses, and I think it's something important also for the users, for the consumers, to have.
I think it encourages innovation, in my opinion. I mean, like you said, you're meeting companies almost on a daily basis who have this concern about, okay, where is my data going to reside? How much control will I have over this? And I think this is going to open the door for European-based solutions. Although that brings another discussion because I was working on a project and with DigitalOcean, setting up some databases there. And I was thinking, I was like, all right, I am choosing a host location in Europe, but DigitalOcean is still US owned. So it doesn't matter where I host it because in the end, it's still going to be an AWS or an Azure or a Google hosting site where my data is situated, meaning that US authorities would still have access to
this is the main difference.
Yeah.
I have like exactly the same. It's not because I think the first version of regulation was about data transfers. We talked a lot about data transfers, like the ability to get the data physically from a place to another. But at the same time, I think we forgot about the laws that govern those companies, because if they have the right, if there's like the US government that comes and that I need access to all those customers from a certain country. Yeah, they need to comply. If this is like the US law, they need to comply. And then even though like the data residency is in Europe, it doesn't make any difference. And I think this is where the independency in terms of having alternatives to critical tech is really, really important. It's not a matter of all the time getting the newest technology, etc. Maybe it will come like in 1-2 years, but I think that the European Union and even like the UK and all those countries that they want to be really independent, they need to, not with tariffs, I don't believe in tariffs, but they need like to promote local players. So we can have alternatives, not block any global solutions. Because obviously you have many, many European companies that operate globally. And I think it's insane to say that, make tariffs on those companies. No, we need to have competition, but at the same time, it's really strategic in this era to have alternatives and critical solutions. And obviously, if we talk about customer data, whether it's storage, whether it's users, whether it's like the AI layer that would use this customer data and build agents out of it, you need to have alternatives, local alternatives. Obviously, at the end, you would leave it's an open market and it's a free market. And I think I really don't want to like come back to a world where you need only to buy locally and you have no access to other products or services from across the border. But I believe that European governments have really responsibility to promote those strategic industries, not only AI, but the data infrastructure and all the players. And I think like really customer data is obviously one of the most critical industries that the governments need to think about strategically and define. I don't know, like maybe more investment from maybe more financial loans, maybe promoting less taxes on companies that buy local, things like that. That would promote and encourage, companies to buy locally. I have seen like a main blocker in Europe, and I was really tempted to go to San Francisco at a certain stage. Everyone saying go to YC, there are business, etc. Anyways, I believe that
you didn't end up going.
Yeah, I didn't end going, and it went against all the odds, saying there's a market, and I had like a big belief that we have an advantage of being European and operating in Europe and having our offices in Europe and
yeah, talk about
the
timing,
support,
by the way.
etc.
Talk about timing for DinMo at the moment. It's critical. But you mentioned that kind of that drive towards independence for European countries, or at least independence from external suppliers. Like you correctly mentioned, it's not only the US, it's also dependency on the likes of China, etc. But I mean, it's still a game of convenience, though. If I'm on the work floor with some of my clients, I mean, they're all still using the same platforms. You've got your Snapchats, your TikToks, you've got your Meta, you've got your Google, because it drives value. But when are we going to shift? Of course, there needs to be an alternative before we shift. But yeah, how do we get people off of the good stuff? I mean, Google, all these platforms, they've proven themselves to drive value, but it's still a matter of convenience because there are, to my best knowledge, no real European alternatives that can generate the same level of return. Is that something that you see?
We understand the question. Like you take, for example, why don't we take OVH? It's European. It's in France. We have data centers everywhere.
Yeah.
But the thing, the reality, they have a lot of services that are not at the same level of innovation as AWS and Google Cloud Platform. So as a company, you want to innovate, you would take the infrastructure that would give you the best options to innovate rapidly, etc. So I think that sometimes we can blame companies that make this choice. And ourselves also, we use a lot of solutions that are from the US. And it's obviously, like, if you look at all the tech stack that companies in Europe, even claiming like independency and etc., we are using some tech in our tech stack. We're building over.
It's hard.
Not by choice.
I don't think we're at a point yet, unless even if you would do self-hosting of open source solutions, it's probably going to be on a Amsterdam location in my case, but it's still going to be an AWS server.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned. But to your knowledge, you mentioned, what was it, QBH in France? Does
OVH, yeah.
OVS.
H.
Okay, OVH. Yeah.
It's the OVH cloud. It's like the small competitor of AWS, etc. It's mainly data centers.
Yeah.
And honestly, like at a certain time, they had like the same size like Google Cloud Platform, but they like when you have the scale of the US market and it's the same market, the same language, so it's easy to replicate, you innovate really faster. And it happened all the time. You begin with alternatives coming from Europe, and then they can't compete because the US companies, they go super fast. And for all those global businesses like data infrastructures, AI, etc., they have an edge advantage because the market is so liberal, and people adopt really faster the new new technologies. And obviously, when you have like you have this advantage and you grow, like you win 1-2 years, then at a certain level, it's too late to be in the same discussion as those US companies. And that's why, like we obviously, I think the companies like OVH, it's too late, and they weren't considered as a strategical industry at the time, and then it became, and then we didn't find any alternative. And I believe, like at a certain time, the government should think about, like define those critical industries and really promote new companies to innovate and to reduce this gap between in terms of innovation. And the problem is like it's a matter of adoption, because if everyone is adopting GCP, everyone is building on those same platforms. You can't even hire people like to build on other platforms because it's not the same technology, etc. But if you are promoting companies to adopt new solutions in terms of taxes, in terms of, I don't know, like maybe, give them a chance, because it's the main blocker we have seen in Europe compared to the US is from an enterprise perspective, dealing with local companies on, critical parts of the tech stack is not super easy. It's not as easy as in the US. People in the US are really bullish and they buy new technologies. They trust new technologies. In Europe, I think it's not really the case.
Okay, so you're thinking that European companies are a little bit more reserved in adopting. Okay, Well, there is something to be said for that. I've seen some very outdated stacks that are, and I've even heard of one bank in Italy that still uploads their CSV file for Google Ads through email. And it's, I hear what you're saying there. Absolutely. I mean, in terms of, I mean, regulations can be restrictive in the sense to, to the point where it harms your business. But yeah, I fully agree with you. There needs to be incentives from the European Union or from individual countries towards companies within their countries to make a stand. Because I honestly believe that looking at yourself, and this is I'm not hiding this compliment. There's talent in Europe to achieve the same level of things, and I think the more advanced we can become, we can attract more people from outside. And not to kick the shins of any Americans out there, but if you're deporting people, give some to us, and we can put them to work here. Maybe that's something I need to cut out there. But it's no, I mean, I think
I understand the question. Like, obviously, as you said, incentives. It's not always regulations. It's not always like the hard way. Regulate so they can't operate, and then we can have other alternatives. I think it's basically like recognizing there's like a shift in terms of new technology.
Yeah.
You have a gap, and you need to close this gap. And it means injecting some money in some critical industries. And we have seen this, for example, in France with Emmanuel Macron over the last years. We went from a country that didn't attract any tech startup, and all those companies, all those founders graduating from engineering schools.
Yeah.
We have obviously in France, one of the graduates in mathematics and other subjects like physics, etc. And all the time, like the best talents would go to San Francisco, would go to the US, build their companies, to build their ventures, etc. Because in Europe it's so regulated, etc. There's no incentive. So it's hard to build, etc. So there was like this narrative, and in France, over the 6-7 years, basically 10 times the size of tech businesses, and 10 times the number of unicorns that we have built over the course of 8 years, because it's only incentives. So we have they promoted some industry, they gave some guaranteed loans, and so they made a whole ecosystem that would promote people to build companies in Europe versus the US. But I think something that didn't change is the adoption. How can you, incentivize companies, industries, enterprises that need those solutions to trust those startups and buy those solutions, make more POCs so you can build faster? Because honestly, from a founder perspective, this is like our main blocker in DinMo in the early years, getting those early adopters. When you talk to an enterprise, it's so complicated. They have no incentive. They consider you as a big company. They would make you compete with Salesforce. You don't have the sense of Salesforce, obviously. You don't have the same means, etc. So there's no difference in terms of if we had imagine something that would promote working with startups who would pay less, reducing the taxes that they would pay at the end. So for, promoting the fact of building with a startup, I think that this would be the best option to promote new industries. And then, you need to inject money, you need to invest in those companies. And I think
you need to give the people who are investing, it kind of trickles down. You need to give the people who are investing a specific tax break.
And they can be like American investors, but they need to invest in the European. To be honest, we need some players, the local players, and we need investors from all over the world to come and invest in Europe, because as you said, we have the talent. I think we have the main problem that you would face in such situation is the lack of talent. I don't believe that we lack talents in Europe. Yeah. It's more that they're going elsewhere to find a company or build their company. So we need to attract them and convince them that there's an ecosystem where they can build champions, global champions from Europe to go global.
Yeah. I mean, looking back at how you described building up DinMo, what are kind of the things you do differently if you were given the chance again? Sounds like a very generic, cheesy question.
Yeah,
but I mean,
I don't think I would go to the US, to be honest.
Well, you didn't. I mean, that's a good thing, right?
I didn't, and I wouldn't. Because many people, they would say, I didn't went to the US, or I didn't apply for YC or things like that, because there's a different culture. I think it's a matter of No, obviously, as I said, like working customer data, etc. So it was the right choice to have a go-to-market focused in Europe, built in Europe.
Yeah. And I think you initially focused with DinMo on France, but like you said, you have an office now in the UK. Are you noticing that the requests for DinMo are pan-European or even outside of Europe already?
We have inbound from outside of Europe, and we have customers outside of Europe. But obviously, we won't search for companies outside of Europe. Our sales team would go for companies from Europe, locally in France and the UK, and then also in Nordics, in Netherlands, and Germany, and Switzerland, etc.
Yeah.
And we have a footprint. You really like, let's say, more than 95% of our customers are European. And they all the time say the same thing. We wanna compare all solutions globally, but there's really like at the end an advantage for European players.
Yeah.
Our first German customers said this, and then they promoted DinMo for other players, and they were really happy discovering that there are like some players that would be an alternative.
I've always experienced that in Germany. It feels like a really close-knit community, the entire tech, all those companies, that if you get your foot in the door with one of them, they all know each other. That's how it constantly feels like. And it's like, I'll put you into touch with that one. And before you know, you've got 10, 20 more companies in your agenda.
Yeah. It's the case. I think it's the same in France. Like the European Union originally, they were really driven by the Germany and France, and they are really pro-European. And you feel this energy, this motion globally, and you have like many companies and decision makers. Because obviously, you can have some policies in the companies, but at the end, it comes to the decision maker that would decide to choose a player from Europe or outside of Europe.
But tell me this without revealing too many business secrets.
Mm-hmm.
You're a composable CDP, and I can imagine, just based on the industry knowledge that I have, the kind of competition you're facing on, let's say, the short list of certain companies. I think all of them are all US based, or at least 100%. North America. What is it that makes companies choose DinMo? And I know we discussed the geopolitical part, the data residency, but is there something else that makes DinMo a safer bet than some of the more I don't want to say well-established because you guys are established, but the more better-known brands in the market?
With more funding, with more resources, obviously, etc. That they have built faster in the US.
What's the special sauce for DinMo? Tell me.
I think, to be honest, it was hard. It's not that easy. As I said, like on all those critical and global businesses, US companies, founded companies, they have an advantage because they can grow faster than us in Europe. For many reasons. I said like the companies in the US, they trust entrepreneurs, they trust startups, etc. It's not the case in Europe. And also they get funding really, really easy because the US market is really, it's huge. And we talk about Europe, but obviously it's not the US. It's not like different states. Still, some countries with specific laws, specific processes of how they buy softwares, etc. So we don't have like the same depth. So they grow faster. And then in our specific case, we try to have the same coverage in terms of functionalities, in terms of features. So we say like maybe we don't have like the same funding and still don't have like the same number of customers globally, but in Europe we have more customers, we have more footprint, we have better understanding of the global tech stack around the CDP. Like we build integrations with some local marketing automation tools, like Actito, like Selligent, like Bash. They're not known in the US. So those global companies, when they come, lately for a German company, we have built with the marketing automation that no other competitor had it and even like the German company, they didn't believe that you would be able to build this integration.
You guys would have proved yourself then.
Yeah, because it was a local player. So if you build integration with this local player, it means that you're obviously spending time and resources on an integration that would use with, let's say, 3, 5, 10 potential customers, and that's all. And if you build with other marketing automation, let's say Salesforce Marketing Cloud, for example, you know that you would have like 1/3 or 25% of our customers that would use this integration. But for us, it was really important to say that you're working with a European player. And we not only on the contract or complying with the GDPR, speaking the same language in certain cases if you are in the UK or in France, is also we can adapt to the global tech stack that you use to achieve your final goal. CDP never works alone. There are a lot of other tools. And now we are in discussion with the OVS, for example, to build integrations with their own data warehouses,
Oh, that's
cloud
pretty
data
cool.
warehouses, etc. Yeah, because for us, it's need to be a dynamic, and it's need to be also pushed by the global industry and those companies that they share the same values and the same.
Is their market share in France growing because of these tensions at the moment?
Honestly, I think it's still early stages to jump to conclusion, but when you speak, it's a subject, and in France, we speak about this like every day. Like what's happening in the US has an impact on France, and so yeah, people are starting. It's a subject, like it's a daily subject, so it's not like national.
Yeah, we talk about
issues.
the weather here in the Netherlands, so it's Maybe it says more about me than the French. Yeah.
But again, it's a matter of we don't see any impact, so people are still buying the same procurement process, etc.
Yeah.
But decision makers are more and more, let's say, when you talk about the fact that the European differentiator, the fact that you have your support team, compliance with GDPR, all the features that you have built because you are European, and you really mean it in terms of if you look at everything, the storytelling, the product, the features that you have built, it means that you value the fact that you're European. Yeah, you have advantage, but it's not the only thing that would. Again, it depends on the decision maker.
Yeah.
Because there's no policy company-wise saying, as you said earlier in the podcast, that they would say there's a policy in the company to promote local players. I still didn't see any change in all the companies that we work with saying that from now on it will only be French companies or European companies. It's still not yet there.
And so last week I was talking about with Vaibhav Antil from Pravado AI, and we were talking about privacy in general. And I asked him a question. I said, who are the people reaching out to you the most to kind of do a RFP or start with an RFI? And he said it was definitely legal teams, because legal teams, they need to take control of the privacy issues surrounding the company. I mean, how is that with DinMo though? I mean, is it still the regular marketing and IT people, or are you also having early discussions with legal teams, just because of the fact that you're European based and that they are very concerned about that data residency piece?
All the time. With European companies, you would get through the legal team. Never had the contract signed without going through the legal team. It's not only like SecOps questionnaires and things like that. It's really like going to the legal team. They would review the contract. They would make sure that it's governed by European laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the time.
Do you notice a preference from legal team to be working with a European-based company versus a US-based?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I said. Like, like have the decision maker. They may have decision makers is the one who will use the product, and who ask it for the product. So obviously, they would look for the functionalities of the product first, and then they may have a preference or not for European local companies for support reasons, mainly because it's a critical piece of tech, and yeah, they are afraid it won't work, and then they won't have the support they need. But for the legal team, obviously they would all the time, and I have seen it many, many, many times, they would push in those RFI and RFPs to have some local players for this exact reasons, because they want to talk to their legal representative in those companies the same language, speaking about local laws, etc.
And here's another question that just popped into my head. Do you have any European competitors?
Honestly, like for now, we have like the first generation of those CDPs, but in our composable approach, we are the only, and we always present ourselves on the first slide of DinMo. We are the first European composable CDP.
That's a pretty cool
on the
claim.
first slide. Yeah, this is exactly the first thing, the title of the first slide of DinMo, you would see it, European and composable, and then CDP. So we present ourselves like this, and we say it from the first slide that we want to be the European champion, the European alternative. We know there are like competitors. I think we don't have a gap or a bigger gap, and we differentiate in terms of functionalities, features, but obviously the same approach you would have it with other competitors with more funding in the West and in North America, globally. But yeah, we really assume it and claim it high and say it all the time. And even when you say European, even in the UK, we say we're European.
Yeah.
And we tell them like that we have opened this office to say it's the same continent.
We still consider you partially European. Yeah, it's I see it as a whole different generation that made a decision there that a lot of people couldn't get out of for Brits. But that's pretty much it. But so, I mean, it's a difficult topic, privacy. And I've spoken to a lot of privacy people, like I mentioned, Vaibhav. I've spoken to Brian Clifton, who has the tool Verified Data. And I feel that for a lot of people, it always remains confusing. How far can you go with your implementation? What kind of personal identifiable information can you collect? How should you transport from point A to point B? But how do you stay on top of all that legalese, confusing talks? I mean, for me, I'm definitely not the one to ask specific questions around the legal aspects of GDPR, or in the Netherlands, we have AVG. I'll definitely use something like ChatGPT to kind of give me a rundown and then double check with someone who knows what they're doing. But how do you, as a founder, stay up to date on how you should deal with the data?
Yeah, we have. I participate in a lot of events, and I know, like some other founders that we like. OneTrust, for example, it's a French-founded company. It's like all the banners that you will see. Yeah, I follow a lot of content from some editors, from some people on LinkedIn, etc., to get aware. If there's like a major change, to be honest, I need to be aware of it because it would have an impact on our business. But yeah, from there, to be honest, I'm more focused on like those big changes that they may come that I'm not aware of. So I'm following those people that they're interested in this business because they're founder in the privacy industry, to be aware of all those changes. But to be honest, like since GDPR is changing, but not that much.
No.
Not the way that would impact the way that we are operating or things that we can do. So for example, the last thing that really happened and impacted us. So Google Ads, with the GDPR, etc., they were obliged to, each time you send anything to Google Ads, to explicitly give the consent for personalization and so give like the details of the consent in any call or any data that you would send to Google Ads. And before it was like, you would say that if you send to Google Ads, it means that you have the right and the consent to send it.
Yeah.
And enforcing this would make people think twice. They can't say, I didn't understand, because they see it directly. And from the moment it went out and we had like this from Google, we directly integrated, and we were the first ones to integrate it across all our competitors because we are European, and we showed our customers and we sent an official communication saying, update on all your Google Ads activations. You need with the next update in GDPR and following the updates from Google Ads, we integrated this way so we can, and now you don't have like the possibility to share any data through DinMo, even though we can just say that we didn't. Yeah, it's the responsibility of the customer, and if he doesn't do it, we just share this data. So we enforce this in our product, and it's like mandatory to be mapped, those consent, and if they don't have it, we block any share of personal data, which obviously we do it because to show everyone like that it's really important to do it, and that's not only saying we just like a tech piece so people can send whatever they want the way they want, and they have the responsibility.
I mean, that's so ethical and morally right. I'm expecting this little halo above your head and these angel wings. I'm like,
we're still a business.
Yeah, you're still a business, but still, I mean, owning that takes a lot, and I think it's a great example for a lot of companies to take into account when dealing with European citizens. There's just a lot at stake here, especially with all the rulings, and with 4% of your, I believe it's your yearly revenue at stake. I mean, you can wait until somebody knocks on your door. You could just take, like you guys, just take action now and make sure that everything's. Hey, looking into your crystal ball, how do you see the kind of the market developing, the European SaaS market, and potentially jurisdiction?
I think it could be driven by governments, the European Commission, etc. And I think they're getting more and more aware of the importance of independence on some critical tech industries, especially.
That's the positive side of this all, right?
Yeah, this is the positive side. So they would promote and we make sure that they have an alternative they started with AI. A lot of money has been invested in AI in Europe, and I think it's the right approach. Not saying obviously you would have always gaps with open AI, with Anthropic, with a lot of like because they started earlier and they had the disadvantage. But you need to reduce this gap and not say no, it's too late and now like the dices are growing and there is no competition. Yeah, obviously you would always be the challenger, but you would build like it's not a problem of being like 1 year late in terms of innovation from the moment that you do things the way that European consumers would request it. Honestly, I think this is the impact will start with AI, but then it will get globally on a lot of critical tech pieces, and including data infrastructures and customer data management tools. And I think it would create a lot of business in Europe.
Yeah.
If you say tomorrow, like if it gets a little bit hot between the US and other countries in Europe, more than it's the case obviously today, but it doesn't have any impact, global impact on how we consume, how we use things. But imagine tomorrow you don't have Instagram, you don't have YouTube, you don't have Google. How would people operate? I think we will create a new economy, and would push people. There will be money and there will be investment that would create an economy, and you will have like other alternatives. And obviously, they would have like more consumers, more adoption, and you will have an alternative. Maybe it's not like the Google standard, but whatever. From the moment it's, like it's not food and things like basic things that we need in our daily life.
No, but still, we still make ends meet when, like you said, we would find ways to overcome those gaps. And I think that the times are, current times are just exposing those gaps even more, and the urgency with which the European Union, European businesses need to become independent of and kind of get out of that geopolitical game by becoming more independent.
Exactly. And honestly, I don't see the chaos, because many people that would say it's chaos. When we had like GDPR, people said it's chaos and it will major impact on everything, on industry, on business. It created new businesses. It created like a new dynamic in the business, and people were copying like years after European. And we had I witnessed this. I saw this like in YouTube in the Congress when they were basically auditing Mark Zuckerberg and saying in Europe. So they had this like GDPR. How can we be inspired by this to make some regulations? Because so I think sometimes we need to trust a little bit more people that legislation makers, like in the European commissions, etc., and not only like here, like the thoughts from obviously biased founders that would want to work globally, work on the US, etc., and they see Europe only as a block of innovation. No, it's just local laws. So let's stay by the laws from the moment that you are here and comply with everything that is within the boundaries of Europe. So I don't see it as a problem. It's just a way, if we're not in, in the global economy where people can trade without any boundary, etc., and we see risks in terms of, ability to trade globally, we absolutely need to have alternatives for not to block, as I said in the beginning. I'm not a pro, nationalism or pan-European and say we buy only European, etc. No, honestly, I think we need to keep global because we need each other and we need to keep relation with any other country. But at the same time, we need to think of tough times when things change brutally, like it did in the US, and would have impact locally on Europe. And you would be happy to have alternatives at those times. And it's not like only weapons, etc., and the army investment, etc. Because people before, they would all the time think about this, like war times. But I think it's also all the infrastructure that we build our businesses is on. If you don't have any alternative, honestly, I think it would be really, really dangerous when we get to times where we don't have like global peace.
Oh, and I mean, even the value of data. And I think with GDPR, the only chaos I saw were a couple of marketers who got word because their performance reports weren't reflecting reality, because people were starting to, we were blocking traffic that wasn't consented for, which was just by the law. And I mean, marketers are still around. They're still doing campaigns on Meta and Google, and they still have the same questions. Data is never going to match 100%. I mean, a lot of this attribution data, but I think they still have the right tools to get the job done.
Exactly.
Oussama, thank you very much for joining me live from Paris today. And if I can convince my other boss, aka my wife, to pop into the DinMo office during the summer, I'll definitely let you know beforehand.
Just grab a coffee, and we'll offer like some
3-hour-long presentation. Yeah, it's good seeing you again. And
thank you so much.
I look forward to hearing more about DinMo in the future.
Yeah.
Bye.